Welcome to My Life, Chassidus Applied, episode 311. We're literally in Isru Chag, the day after Shavuos, Zman Matan Teirasenu. I hope everybody had a very meaningful and revelatory recreation of the Sinai experience 3,332 years ago. The Torah, God's mandate, blueprint of existence was given to us, and every year we recreate it. We don't just remember and commemorate it, we recreate it. Specifically, when we listen to and we read and listen to the 10 Commandments, the Aseres Hadibros on the first day of Shavuos, men, women, and children, as the Rebbe requested. He initially made that request in 1980, which is Tafshin Mem, 40 years ago. And I've seen in my own community and other places, people innovatively finding ways. Those that minimally, the shuls have been very closed, but most couldn't go to a shul. So minyanim, different places, all done correctly, socially correctly, based on the guidelines of doctors and authorities, found ways to listen to and hear the Aseres Hadibros. So this year will be marked in a way that God Himself can see. Look at this unique nation that you have, that even in challenging times, finds ways to experience Matan Torah, and of course it's more than just the reading and the listening, it's internalizing the message of Anoichi Hashem Elokecha Asher Hitzisicha Me'eretz Mitzrayim. I am your God that took you out of Mitzrayim, and the following, the Aseres Hadibros, or 9 Dibros after Anoichi. So everyone hopefully had a very healthy and meaningful and powerful Matan Torah. And now our challenge is carrying that energy into Isru Chag. Literally means bound to the holiday. The day after the Yom Tov is bound. It's in a sense, in spiritual terms, it's a interface of bringing the energy of Shavuos and Matan Torah into the rest of the year. So it begins with the day after, because that's when you really see the litmus test. When someone experiences something while they're experiencing it and they're having an inspiration is one thing. But if that inspiration translates into concrete action and behavior, that we live up to those guidelines of what Torah expects of us in faith in God and trust in God, and then bringing it down into Ma'aseh B'Peil, because Aseres Hadibros are practical actions, things you should do, things you shouldn't do. That's the ultimate sign that we become a more refined people, following the guidelines, following the mitzvahs, the commands of the Aseres Hadibros. Interestingly, people call the 10 Commandments. I always wondered, Aseres Hadibros actually means 10 statements, 10 words, 10 expressions, dibros. But it turned into commandments. I don't know if it's an accurate translation, but that's what's used. It's also used in Talks and Tales and other places where the Rebbe translates the Aseres Hadibros. So that has that has full standing. But it's interesting, dibros and commandments are not exactly the same word. But regardless, the message is, as I said, a mandate, a blueprint for life. Now that couldn't be more relevant than today, because we're dealing with challenging situations, the pandemic that has affected all of us. And now, as the first question I'm going to address is another form of a pandemic, the riots consuming now the cities across the United States. But before I continue with that, I want to just firstly dedicate this program, dedicated by Mark and Sarah Belinsky in honor of their wife and mother, Rebecca Belinsky, and just mention that a few practical things, that My Life Chassidus Applied, of course, addresses all issues. Nothing is off limits. Go to ChassidusApplied.com, a special website where you can find all the previous episodes, as well as a forum where you can submit anonymously, completely anonymously, your question or comment or feedback, critique, anything you wish. It also has the essays that people have written over the years, which apply Chassidus to a contemporary issue or challenge. We are in the midst of finishing the essay contest of this year. It was delayed due to the situation, so you'll hear about that in the near future. And other resources, especially recently I began on Zoom teaching Ayin Beis, the classic magnum opus, perhaps the Mount Everest of all Chassidus, all Kabbalah, mysticism, Ayin Beis from the Rebbe Rashab, which began to be delivered and written 108 years ago, Tafresh 1912. So now we're in 2012. I began teaching it then, but now because of the situation, Zoom is of course one of the options of learning online. And please join us. It's an open class every day, 9:30 till 10:30 a.m. Sundays 10 a.m. through to 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, Eastern Daylight Time. You can go to ChassidusApplied.com and you'll find all the information, the Zoom address, and all the ID info to be able to log in. And more resources that you'll find at Chassidus Applied, specifically due to this pandemic that began literally right Purim time and is continuing. We hope that it's ending soon. So we've created special materials addressing the human challenges we're all facing, whether it's issues of fear and the unknown, whether it's personal issues, health-related or psychological or emotional, whether it's the pressure and tensions that it's creating in families, parents and children, spouses, and other issues, of course, that come up and become glaringly magnified when there's a unique situation, quarantined from going to shul, on the religious front, and so many different areas affecting us economically and politically, and our plans basically have all been upended, schools. So we created special section on both on meaningfullife.com/corona and ChassidusApplied.com. You'll find there plenty of materials. Probably in the last 3 months, I must have reached more people than in the last 10 years. The receptivity, the vulnerability, the commonality that we're all sharing in a time like this where people look inward when their outer life has been disrupted has really created a tremendous demand, and I'm honored that I was placed in a position where I sat at the feet of a Rebbe and absorbed some Chassidus and is able to some way give people some hope and direction and guidance. All the failings of a human being and all the challenges we all face, but the key is to stand together and to stand stronger than ever and realize that every challenge comes also with a bundle of strength to be able to get through any situation, and that we should be able to look back at this time and say, we've become stronger people for it. We've become a stronger Jewish people, more refined, more noble, kinder, more loving, more unified than ever. So, of course, in that context, the first question I literally got last night, meaning Mitzvah Shabbos, was in the spirit of what's happening now in the country, that in addition to a pandemic that has affected everyone and people, millions and millions of jobs, over 30 million people who have filed for unemployment. You see this outbreak of riots due to the meaningless and senseless killing of Mr. Floyd in Minneapolis, Minnesota. How do you look at this from a Torah and Chassidic point of view in the context of everything else going on? Another person writes, what is our attitude to this? Is it justified to go out into the streets and riot and loot due to an injustice that was done to one man in Minneapolis? So let me respond to all of this. The word pandemic actually comes from the Greek. Pan means all, and demic comes from the daemon, means from the word people, all people, something that affects all people. Not sure why it's only used in the area of disease, but anything that affects all people can technically be called a pandemic. So when you see also an outbreak in all the major cities of anger and frustration over what they call police brutality, you have to ask yourself what is going on. Like any situation, as we talked so many times, when something happens, nothing's by accident. There must be something behind it. Now, this doesn't justify it all, but you have to still look into it. So let's begin firstly with the specifics of what's happening right here. Anyone that sees the videotape of what was done to Mr. Floyd sees clearly this was an injustice, that a policeman should put his knee on the neck of a person to the point that he died. I mean, we all are appalled, especially coming from a law officer, and justice is for everyone. No one is above the law. So I think we all agree, I have no doubt, but we all agree about that. The reaction to that, is there police brutality? Is there insensitivity? Clearly, if one police officer could do that, others could also. But that doesn't mean that every police officer, God forbid, is a criminal. So that has to be cleaned out and rooted out. Is a crime, one crime, justification for another crime? To loot, to harm others, to cause people to feel danger? Even if you were to argue that anger it's an outburst of anger of this injustice, and there's a lot of frustration because people feel police are brutal, maybe perhaps more with blacks and minorities than with others, especially when you see a white policeman and a black man. So even if there is a justification to that, I'm not going to go into it. Let's, for argument's sake, there is. There are many ways to express it. And doing criminal acts is definitely not a way. That doesn't mean we ignore we look at the symptoms and try to understand, because there are people here that are also exploiting situations. Immediately this becomes politicized. Democrats, Republicans, you can see it, people mudslinging back and forth that the Democrats' fault, it's the Republicans' fault. I will say the following. This is coming from at best, to my ability, a Torah and Chassidus perspective, especially as I see now the Rebbe in a balanced approach. There's law and order. There are guidelines of what is correct and what is incorrect. When somebody breaks the law, whether it's a police officer, whether it's a citizen, there has to be justice. It's the basis of civilization. It's one of the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Neach, which we'll talk about in a moment. That you have to have law and order on all ends. And everybody needs to know there's accountability. And there is judgment, yes, and there is punishment if necessary as a deterrent. It's not because we're angry people, it's not because we're looking to get even, it's because any civilized world needs guidelines and order. Ilmoli Merosh al Malchus, the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says, if there wasn't fear of the leadership, of kingship, of government, one person would swallow up another, because self-interest turns corrupt, turns selfish, can turn to the point where you can hurt another for your own benefit. Unfortunately, human beings can stoop to that. So there has to be law and order. That's not even a question. That's the foundation of it all. And when people feel that there's that type of justice across the board, and blacks and whites are treated equally, and minorities are treated equally, and people of all backgrounds and races. And remember, as Jews, we're acutely sensitive to this, because we were usually the ones that were discriminated against. That's a complete aberration, cannot be tolerated. And the basis, especially of this United States of America country, is that all people are created equal. I said people, not just men, even though men is meant to mean men and women, and have inalienable rights given to them by God. By God, yes, created in the divine image. And that nobody can take away from anyone, so everyone is entitled to that. Any type of attack or desecration of that fundamental principle needs to be held accountable. This is unequivocally, there's no option, it's not relative, there's no ifs or buts, there's no exceptions. Obviously, due process is necessary to establish something. You can't just say, due process includes witnesses, includes all that's necessary. Here it happens to be a videotape, which of course created that outrage. And according to the videotape, it's pretty obvious what happened. But still, you have to go through a system. As far as response, yes, you could argue that perhaps going to the streets, some people are exploiting the situation, and they're just criminals. But let's give the benefit of the doubt to some who are sincerely and genuinely outraged. So the going to the streets perhaps is a wake-up call of the need to bring that law and order back into place, especially in a time when we're so fragile and we're so vulnerable and all that's going on, where we should be united more than ever. And in many ways we are and have been. This is really sad, more than sad, it's tragic, because it's in addition to the pandemic, now we have this pandemic of moral justice and inequalities and all that comes with it. But I have to emphasize again, there are people who exploit. This does not mean there isn't justification to justice and needing to bring to account and to justice people who've done crimes, including police officers. But the exploiters are unfortunately also a major part of the problem. So you have to really clear the air, and unfortunately we don't necessarily have a moral leadership. Not in the political world, not in the business world, and even in the religious world. Very weak voices have been heard in the last few months, here and there. But a type of uniting voice has not really been heard. So we have to do it in a grassroots level, each of us in our own communities, in our own homes, in our own lives. And yes, it's unacceptable, again, any form of one person compromising the integrity of another person's dignity and life. And this goes on both ends, also in how we respond. This is on the immediate short-term level. But there's also bigger issues here. And just as I've been discussing about the pandemic on a bigger scale, let's talk about some bigger issues. And it's interesting, all this happening literally on Shavuos, on the holiday of Shavuos of Matan Torah. So you cannot ignore the connection. One of the most fundamental principles of Matan Torah at Sinai was that the basis of all morality is Anochi Hashem L'kecha, that there's a God. This became the cornerstone of the Rebbe's talking all about Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei Neach, which are 7 universal laws of civilization from the beginning of time. That Matan Torah was not just given 613 mitzvahs for the Jewish people, but the entire universal code for the entire human race, which already began with Avram Avinu, and before that, the acceptance of it, the understanding of it, the consensus, but it was not formalized. At Sinai it was formalized. And just for the record, in case people wonder, they say 7 mitzvahs b'nei neach. You often hear people say, what 7 mitzvahs? 7 little mitzvahs. The Jews, Amma Nifcha, the chosen people, have 613 mitzvahs. Well, let me tell you one thing, my friends. If every Jew kept the 7 mitzvahs b'nei neach, we'd have Moshiach here already. Because it's basically the Aseres Hadibros besides Kibud Avayim and Shabbos. So the Shem Mitzvahs B'nei Neach are not little small details. And the Mefarshim, the commentaries already break it down, just like every mitzvah is broken down. Some break it down to 30, to 90, because you're talking about the fundamentals of civilization. You're talking about respect for God. I'm speaking in the positive, which is the opposite of disrespect to God, not cursing. You're talking about respect for life, the opposite of murder. Respect for family, the opposite of sexual impropriety. The opposite of theft is what is respecting people's property, respecting the environment, which is based on Ever Min HaChai, not to cause pain to an animal. Ever Min HaChai is understood to be a lot more than just eating the limb of a living animal. It's the whole attitude. And of course, the ultimate, creating B'otei Dinim, laws of homes of B'otei Dinim, courts and houses of justice, police, Sheftim V'Sheitim, judges, justice, which is the basis of accountability in a world where you could have self-interest and different interests conflict with each other. So comes the big question. These are all basic things that every logical person can come to. So why is Aseres Hadibros begins with Anochi Hashem L'kecha, when afterwards Le'signev, Le'sirsach, Le'sinaf, earlier Kabdes Avicha V'Semecha. Most of these mitzvahs are logical. Human logic would dictate them. What do you need the first? Anochi, I am your God. As if you didn't have the first of the 10 commandments, the first of the Aseres Hadibros, the others would not follow. Explains the Rebbe in a beautiful way. Because if you don't have that solid, unwavering foundation of a God, then morality becomes relative. Depends on what people think. What's murder? The Nazis had a whole different take on what murder was. For them, murder was murdering a cat or a dog, pets, and Jews were not an issue, Rahman al-Islam. So you can translate every moral law if you go based on you become God and you determine what is right, what is wrong, or it all falls apart. That's why the first foundation, the cornerstone, which the founding fathers of the United States understood and appreciated, is the first thing is the life, that all people are created equal and have inalienable rights given, endowed to them by their Creator, not by each other. Because as soon as you take out the Creator, and I've thought about this many times, I've asked some legal, constitutional scholars, why they were deists. They were deists, the founding fathers. They weren't particularly religious. They definitely wanted to keep a separation between church and state. So why they put words, created equal? All men are created equal. They could have said all men are born equal. All men are equal. And again, creator, endowed by the creator. They said endowed by nature. We have already the contracts, insurance policies. They actually write acts of God, not acts of nature, because they need someone to blame, so they shouldn't have to pay. That's an aside. Creator, why use the word creator, which immediately elicits all discussion about a creation, about a creator? So I've never heard a full answer. My speculation is because they understood very simply, and they knew they were students of history. Take out creator and just say you're born equal, then someone can say, 1 second, not everybody's born equal. How do you know? Or even if they are, we can take away those rights. Once you invoke the name of a creator, we're not creators. We're all creations, creatures. And once it's endowed by the creator, it's inalienable. You can't take it away from anyone. That makes it absolute. So in a way, they acknowledge the anoichi connection to the other Hadibros, which also extends to all the Shem Mitzvahs B'nei, that the first thing is a God, that we're accountable. Life is not called the Alim Gvad, survival of the fittest, whoever is most powerful. We are answering all equally to a higher power, to a creator that created the universe, created existence, created life, created you and I, and gave us laws how to live with each other properly, to live up to the purpose for which God created the universe. Is this a religious concept? No. That's why the Founding Fathers had no issue. Because this is a moral concept. It's a foundational element in life. So right smack, in the middle of when we're receiving the Torah, and we're renewing our contract, the Sinai contract, and the mandate, all this breaks out. You tell me, what lesson do we have from that? It's just 2 + 2 = 4. It's very straightforward. You see here an outbreak of crime, whether it's a police officer against a citizen, or it's citizens doing things criminal. Everybody is accountable to the same laws. So what Sinai teaches us, what Shavuos teaches us, especially in context of what's happening now, the importance, not just optional, the vital importance of reclaiming our connection that there's a God. Ayin re'eh ve'ezen shemas, an eye that sees and an ear that hears. All of us, and we're all subject to laws. Yes, there's a due process to determining what's right and what's wrong, but it's all based on something that's not optional, that's not arbitrary. Anochi Hashem Elokecha. So in the big picture of things, obviously the small picture has to be dealt with correctly, in a sensitive way, addressing people's concerns, making sure crime doesn't respond to crime. That's one thing. But overall, the lesson is very clear. We need to embrace this. And this is a wake-up call. You could say, 1 second, everything is just falling apart. People say, look, everything's falling apart. The pandemic has upended and disrupted one part of the whole world. And now this in the United States is disrupting our law and order and our streets and danger and safety. You know, we're just getting out of quarantining, starting to move out. Now the streets are becoming dangerous. That's one way to look at it. That's on the surface level. The deeper way to look at it, Yisbararu v'yislabna hadvarim. It's providing us with clarity. There's nothing like shining a light when there's an infection. And I don't mean just in the context of the pandemic. The healthiest thing is to see the infection. The worst are infections that are festering and no one knows what's going on, to the point that it gets out of control. This is shining a light on the rifts in society, perhaps the inequalities, the injustices. And healthy people look at it as an opportunity to mend. There was a time in history where things like this not just were tolerated, were perpetrated by leaders. And they were in control. We are at least living in a time where people can protest, where people can cry out in a legal way, in an appropriate way, and not being exploited by other criminals and others who have other interests. So we live in a world with these exposed things. It's just as the pandemic has exposed so much about our lives, because when life is disrupted like that, as I've discussed week after week, we have to dig in and find deeper resources. And we have. Here too we have to find deeper resources. At the end of the day, yes, Anochi Hashem Elokecha. God created the entire world, black or white, Asian, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, race, culture, nationality. We are all created by God, 7.5 billion people and counting. And each person has a mission in this world. because God did not create any extras and did not create any waste. Nothing to waste, everything for His honor. So we have to look, especially those that can remain focused, that should remain focused. And this is what we need to be advocating out there, to create a pandemic of goodness and kindness. And when there's an outbreak like this that is happening in the last few days, so yes, it's a tragedy that happened to Mr. Floyd. At the same time, the result of what comes from it should only help us become better people and kinder people. And I'm not speaking in naive terms. We understand that more complicated matters, and we understand there's politics. But this is the platform, My Life Chassidus Applied, to speak things clearly as possible from the perspective of Torah, of Chassidus. The Rebbe, countless times, and especially in the 80s, the Mems, would speak about the world being a jungle when there's no Anochi Hashem Elokecha. That children will turn on teachers, people will turn on each other. And these injustices that we're talking about are all part of the same thing. Every human being is in divine image. How could anybody put their knee on the neck of another human being to the point of asphyxiation, whatever happened there? And crimes that happen as a result of that are equally intolerable and should not be tolerated. So that's the general take on it, and especially in context of Matan Torah. Now, this is a program, yes, My Life Chassidus Applied, but the Rebbe made it very clear in hundreds and hundreds of pages. I vividly remember the Farbrengens of Shavuos, especially. The long Farbrengens would go through into the night, start before the Shkia, before sundown. The Rebbe would wash, let's say 7:30 or 8 in like a time like now. Excuse me. And the Farbrengen would go for hours till after midnight, and then there was Kaishal Bracha. And the themes, especially in the Mems, the mid-80s, was all about Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei Neach. Now, I can't say all, but a large number. As a matter of fact, recently I collected all the Rebbe's Sichos, without commentary, just the raw Hanochas, as they were written, from all the talks, from basically 78, 79 through 90, over 800 pages. 800 pages, it's 4 volumes. You know how many 800 pages, how many Farbrengens that is? Hours, and this was especially Pesach and Shavuos, Motzei Simchas Torah, including, of course, Yutes Kislev and Yud Shvat, different sichos, but hours on this theme. Like a true visionary, the Rebbe, ahead of his time, spoke about things that we have yet to catch up to. When you see what's playing itself out in the streets now, it becomes very clear what those sichos were talking about. Not just to prevent the negative, to prepare the world for a positive world, that we're at the threshold of Geula. And even though we see these outbreaks, the Rebbe made it clear, Purim Tavshim Mem Zayin and other times, these are the last fragments of Yizbaru V'Yislabna Advarim, clarity, of the last so-called remnants of Golus. And we have to see it as such to intensify and amplify and accelerate all our actions around spreading the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei Neach, which includes a moment of silence, a moment of quietude. People should realize that we are accountable from childhood and on, and all this becomes glaringly apparent when you see what's happening right now. And it does connect to the pandemic, because the pandemic, though we could say it's not human actions, even though it's not been clear exactly where this whole thing began, this infection, this disease, this COVID-19, but regardless, it also affects the human condition in a global way. And here too, we have the two options, to be the best we can be, or the opposite, the worst we can be. I'm not going to say what's happening the last few days due to the riots is the worst we can be, because there's a lot of beautiful people, and this has clearly been also documented that this is not thousands and thousands. Again, there is outrage, and perhaps some of it is justifiable and has to be addressed. But I'm not going to say that the country is kind of starting to burn. It just needs to address these real issues. Now, of course, the frustrations around being quarantined and losing jobs, I'm sure, is adding to the fuel to the flames. And hopefully there will be people in leadership who will recognize exactly that mandate, the mandate that many presidents of the United States, when they acknowledged the Rebbe's education day for Yud Aleph Nisan, said this country is based on the principles of the 10 Commandments. 10 Commandments, starting from Anochi Hashem Elokecha. And regarding the rest of us, I say the rest of us, who perhaps are not directly impacted by the riots in the streets and these uprisings, but are impacted by the pandemic, it's always a lesson for us all to recognize that God is running the show. And I say this specifically because I've been receiving, it's sometimes redundant, so I don't read them all, questions about what's going to be with our shuls and with our schools and so on. Now, obviously, we'd all like things to be back to normal, whatever that means. But you have to ask yourself, and I ask people all the time, I ask myself, are you drawn to your shuls because of God wants you to go to shul, or because it's your cultural comfort zone? The Kiddush club, the shul. And I'm not taking away, Shalei Lishma, Ba Lishma. We know in Torah and mitzvahs, even if you do something for ulterior motive, the ulterior motive will ultimately lead you to do it for the right motive. I'm not dismissing that. But when you have a situation where we were deprived, if you wish, or in some ways our schedules, our religious schedules were disrupted, you have to ask yourself, maybe there's an opportunity to challenge your own mitzvah sanoshim ulumada mode, your own mechanical, robotic, by rote Judaism, and discover that God is with you right at home. And yes, you could hear Aseres Hadibros also in other ways besides going to shul. And you can also internalize it to you and your children, your family. We have to always look at everything as an opportunity and not bemoan situations that we don't have control over. Because God runs the world. Anochi Hashem Elokecha is a lesson to all of us. And it's interesting, it says in the Mefarshim, Chassidus cites it, asks the question, Anochi Hashem Elokecha asher etzisichem eretz Mitzrayim. Why doesn't it say something bigger? Asher boros shemayim v'sa'aretz. God, the creator of heaven and earth. That's the creation itself is even bigger than anything. And one of the answers Chassidus gives is creation of heaven and earth by kamashmal, a chiddush that God could create. The chiddush is that even when after there's a creation and there's a Mitzrayim, there's a place where we are enslaved, and in Ruchnisdika terms, inhibitions and boundaries and constraints and limitations. So there you could say God can create heaven and earth, but once it comes to people, human beings, hurting each other, or human beings being trapped by their own trappings and by their own limitations, that is not a different story. God doesn't necessarily protect us. Comes Aseres Hadibros Eretz Mitzrayim, that even in the structure of the universe that was already created by God, there's God takes us out of Mitzrayim, which means which you can fill in the blanks, the Mitzrayim of your life, which makes it far more relevant. That God created heaven and earth, there's no question, is a foundation. But that Creator also intervenes and helps us in every situation, whether we're dealing with a pandemic on a disease level or a pandemic of human injustices and reactions. That Anochi Hashem Elokecha asher tzisicha is the power to give us the strength. Now we have to do our part to receive that blessing, but it's also to free us from all the Mitzrayims, which is how Chassidus explains Mitzrayim from the word Mitzarim v'gvulim. Limitations, constraints, fears, insecurities, internal, external. Everything, starting from the Tzimtzum HaRishon itself, was the first Mitzrayim. Meitzar, a Tzimtzum that concealed the divine. And everything evolved from there. As Chassidus explains, from the Tzimtzum came the Shviras HaKelim, the shattering of the containers, Miyut HaLavana, the diminishing of the moon, Chet Eitzadas, the possibility for a human being to defy God and create their own agenda. And then, of course, the cycle that just decelerates until Avraham Avinu came and reversed the process. And our mission is to take a world where there's fragmentation, and there's concealment, and there's Mitzrayim, and reintroduce Anochi Hashem Elokecha, reintroduce the divine, reintroduce the purpose of existence. That's what we have an opportunity to do like never before, especially using the technologies that God implanted, embedded in existence from the beginning of time, which is what we're doing so much nowadays when we can't be in personal, physical contact. So we're spiritually connected through these devices, through these instruments, through these technologies. Humans develop the machines, but the technology itself, the energy, the power to transcend time and space that these technologies allow us, that's a divine force. A koyach adir, as the Rebbe says in Mishpatim Tavshim Mem Daled. Koyach adir, an enormous and awesome power that God embedded into existence. Okay, my friends, good. So, I think we covered the Chassidus Applied to Post-Shavuos, how we take Anochi Hashem Elokecha and make it relevant to our time. I just elaborated it. It's also Parsha Nasso. Parsha Nasso, since we're talking about the power of every individual, one of the unique things in Parsha Nasso is the repeat of every Nasi, every head of a tribe's offerings in Chanukas HaMishkan. They were dedicating the temple. Remember, Nasso is still a continuation from the end of Pekudei, the end of Shmois, where the Mishkan was erected and established. The whole Sefer Vayikra was said then around Rosh Chodesh Nisan, was when this Mishkan was established. And this continues until next week's Parsha, middle of Baal Escha, where it says the cloud rose on the 20th of Iyar, and their journey began further into the wilderness. So Nasso is still part of a continuation of what happened Rosh Chodesh Nisan, which was the dedication of the temple. So we have every Nasi, to every Shevet, the leader of every tribe, brought his offerings. But the interesting thing, and this is perhaps what makes the chapter the longest chapter in the entire Torah, is it's repeated. They all brought the same offerings. So you could have just said that the first one, Nachshon and Aminadav, the Shevet, the Nasi of Shevet Yehuda, brought these and these offerings, and said the rest. You say ditto. You could say brought the same thing that the other ones brought. No, but each one is spelled out again and again. Explains the Rebbe based on a medrash. Because even though they all brought the same offerings and the same vessels and so on, the same wagons, but each one with their own particular kavanah, because every shevet has its own personality. And each one did it with that kavanah. So the focus, the Torah repeats it to show you the importance of every individual kavanah. So if we're talking about technical, yes, the Torah could have said one brought it and the rest brought the same thing. But no, but the Torah wants to show how important it's ready to extend. And the Torah is always concise. Even very important things, you sometimes get just in a word or two. And here to emphasize the dignity of every individual, which of course is so relevant in our times. No matter how many people are on this earth, each person created B'Tselem Elokim in the divine image with a unique role and indispensable mission. Everyone. And that's what we need to reveal. Okay. I did speak about Post-Shavuos in episode 264 for those that want to have a complete picture of my life, Chassidus Applied. So that's a reference to an earlier episode. Okay, next question. So the questions are still very much focused around the situation we're in, but they're obviously touching about many matters that are not necessarily pandemic related. Why should we believe that God is good in the same sense that we understand what good is? Perhaps what God considers to be good isn't the same as us. A very good question. Of course, in context, when we pray to Hashem, Tev Hanira V'Anigla, that we want a goodness that's revealed and apparent to us. It was not a concealed or hidden goodness. Because Chassidus explains, based on Kabbalah in many places, that there's a thing called Chsadim Nistarim, Chsadim Mechusim, kindness and goodness that's concealed. And it's explained that it's even deeper than revealed goodness. It's so deep it can't express itself in a revealed fashion. So the only way is through a concealed manner. The Alter Rebbe brings it in Tanya, about Yisurim, about the pain, suffering in life. Brought in many other places. The Kutei Torah B'Chukei we spoke about. I believe the curses, that they really are eternal blessings. And many other places explain the Gemara in Moed Katan, where Rabbi sent Rabbi Lozer, his son, for blessings by the Chachamim, and instead they ostensibly seem to have cursed him. He comes back and he's all disturbed. He told his father, "You sent me for a blessing. They cursed me." His father asked, "What did they say?" And once he related what they said, the Rashbi showed him how these words are really b'rechasaninu. They're really blessings. It's a long discussion. These are even greater blessings. So one could argue, as this questioner asks, how do we know? Maybe God's good and our good is not the same. Do they even meet? So when we ask for good, we ask for health. We ask this pandemic end. We ask for good things in life. All the blessings. Who says that what good for God is good for us? So a few key points that have to be made. The Rebbe asked this question in other words in Chelikei Likutei Sichos Vayigash. The famous Mishnah, Yofa Sha'achas B'tshuva Ma'asim Tevim Be'elam Haza Mekol Chaya Elam Haba. more precious is 1 hour of tshuva, return, and good deeds in this world than all the good in the Mechol Chai Elam Haba, everything in the world to come, all of life in the world to come. 1 hour outweighs the entire life in the world to come. But then the Mishnah continues, Yofer Shah Achas Shal Keres Ruach Be'elam Haba Mechol Chai Elam Haza. That 1 hour of pleasure in the world to come outweighs all the pleasures of life, all of life in this world. Says the Rebbe Marash and V'kocha that there's Nachas Ruach Beira and Nachas Ruach Nivra. If you're talking about what the Eibishter enjoys, Nachas Ruach Beira of the Creator, that's Yofer Shachas B'tshuva Ma'asim Tevim. 1 hour is more valuable than all the revelations in the world to come. If you talk about Nachas Ruach Nivra, what we enjoy more, pleasure on our terms, on human terms, on the creature's terms, 1 hour of Elam Haba outweighs all the pleasures of this world. Ask the Rebbe a fundamental question. If that's the case, so Geula, Moshiach, is that only a reward for us? In other words, from God's point of view, He has much more nachas of us being in Golus and struggling in this world than Tshuva Ma'asim Tevim. The only thing is, it's not necessarily we're satisfied with that. So the Eibishter sends us a candy type of reward, Mashiach, Geula. So it's only Nachas Ruach Nivra. But the Eibishter, from his point of view, much more Nachas Ruach in Elam Haza, in this world. And the Rebbe says no. It says, even for Atzmus, which means the essence of divine reality, if Atzmus has to remain concealed, then that shows there's a limitation. The Eibishter has to also, his goodness also has to come out revealed. And what revealed means also revealed for us. So the revealed good on our terms is also good for the Eibishter. In another Sichim, Miketz Tov Shemem Zayin, the Rebbe explains it further and says, so who says that our good is the right good? Maybe it's not. It says the fact that the Eibishter made that things that are revealed on our terms, like if someone says to you, here's a blessing, I'm giving you a blessing, and you don't see it, so you feel it's not complete, that mere fact that we're created that way, that something revealed demonstrates on the completion of a blessing, the consummation of it, means that also Lamaila is that way, because God created us that way. That revelation is critical. So it's true, you can have the Etzem, God's Nachas Ruach, even without it, but it's not complete. And we see that from the human nature. That with all the blessings we have, if they remain concealed, something's missing. That indicates that Lamaila, that's the why God make it that way, because the Eibishter made that Shleimus means also Gili. So that means that though, yes, it's true, there can be situations, at least for a time period, temporary, where a good is deep, even though it's not revealed, and maybe even deeper, but that's not the ultimate. The ultimate is that it should be revealed, that our good and God's good become one. And that's the ultimate answer to this question. So though it's an excellent question that needs to be addressed, but remember, when there's an element of when we're in pain, Hashem is in pain. Shechina, Galu le'edem Shechina imam, the Shechina comes with us. And it says, Kaloni mireshi, Kaloni bizrei, that in other words, when there's pain on earth, there's a pain also in heaven. Kavyachal, so to speak. Imi anechi b'tzara. That God is with us in the pain, and also with us in the joy. So God bound himself. Of course he could have done it differently, but he bound himself. And the mere fact that he created a world where goodness means revealed goodness on our terms means also ultimately for the Eibishter's terms. So the Gul is not just for us, it's for Hashem himself. And it goes both ways. God's goodness becomes something we relate to, and our goodness is a reflection of God's revealed goodness as well. What do you think about the spiritual awakening brought on by the upheaval? Well, I've spoken about this for a while, and someone quotes here a powerful article, how during this coronavirus, new faith among young people now turning more to prayer. Yes, we see a lot of people turning to spirituality, to prayer, to God, and that's natural. As I said earlier, and I've said a number of times, that when the material world, which we invested so much in, and we thought it was going to provide us with ultimate security, becomes disrupted and upended and destabilized, we suddenly realize, no, you can't rely on a foundation that's wavering, that's not there for you. Our jobs, our entertainment, our sports, our eateries, our travel plans, Everything that we relied on, depended on, our schedules, has been disrupted, paused, one big pause. So yes, you can sit and complain and say and be frustrated, I want it all back. Or you can come to realize, as many are, that's not where security lies. Those are nice benefits. The security lies internally, within. What are your beliefs? What are your values? God, faith. So what do I say? What do I say is that I wish it was without pain and grief and loss and death, the pandemic. But after the fact, there is a tremendous wake-up call. I would like to believe in that that's the challenge. Will we be able to maintain it? Or we'll forget. I like to believe that there'll be changes in a good way. Changes forever, both internally, our attitudes, what we value, our appreciation of the things that sometimes people think are small are really the biggest things. Family, love, commitments, devotion, our goodness and kindness. That's what we all want to happen. But sometimes when the door is closed, that door of opportunity, some people just gravitate back to what is easy and comfortable. I believe that it may not be a cataclysmic change, but it's definitely contributing to the general trend of changes that are leading to a Mashiach world. And you look at history. Right now, everything is very glaring, very amplified. But the fact is, it doesn't have to have a change that suddenly overnight everything changes for the good. But a general approach, the weakening of the hold of materialism in our lives, the recognition of the importance of our nobility and our majesty and our dignity. In general, you see the trends going to less violence, less war, less crime, notwithstanding what we're seeing right now. Didn't say it's perfect. But overall, if you look at a trend, the world has become a finer place, kinder place. Humanitarianism. Again, not perfect. So, with the approach, which is also logical, that God created a universe that will realize its purpose. It's all part of Anochi Hashem Elokecha. It will realize its purpose. What purpose is that? That there will be a dira b'tachtenim. That this material, callous, hostile world, tachtenim, the lowest of all worlds, completely concealed divine, where we can convince ourselves it's an agnostic world, we're on our own, will become transformed and becoming a divine home, a divine garden. That is a totally logical conclusion from Anochi Hashem Elokecha. Because if there's a God and created the universe for a purpose, that purpose will be realized. But we're part of the process. We're partners in this journey. And after thousands of years of the billions and trillions of good deeds and sacrifices and noble acts and virtue done, it has transformed and refined the universe. This is basic foundations of Jewish thought. Is it purely faith? I don't see it purely faith. You could say believing in God requires faith. But once you have that, of course the rest follows. There's design, there's a plan, and there's the realization of the plan. That's why belief in Mashiach is equated with belief in God. Because believing in God without believing that the purpose will be realized is like missing half the story. It's not a detail. It's like someone driving a train, and you say the train's not going anywhere, or it's not going to reach its destination. That may as well not have a driver in the first place. Even belief in God, I would say, does not require pure faith, because nothing creates itself. Is there absolute proof? Listen, God didn't make it tzimtzum, so there's a certain agnostic element. The Gemara says that Hashem said to Moshe, those that want to make a mistake will make a mistake. So it makes total sense that the world is evolving toward a better place, and therefore a pandemic like this, and even these riots are all leading toward further clarity and us being wise enough to mend the rifts and to learn our lessons, and yes, a spiritual awakening that turns into a paradigm shift, a restart button, where we can look at life. Things have been paused, not in our control. What are you going to do? Maybe the pause is a way of rebooting your life, relooking in a new way. Will everyone feel the same way? Obviously, people are different. Some people are definitely going to tend to gravitate to their comforts. But others, a little more conscientious, a little more thoughtful, may not. I'd like to believe that the critical mass, that the overall mood has changed. And that will shift. And just like there are other disruptors, technology, Amazon, President Trump, that have disrupted the beginning of the 21st century, that will continue in a positive way. As Chassidus says, a disruption is the ayin be'emtza, is the void, the vacuum between two realities. When one paradigm shifts to another one, it doesn't come easily. There has to be some disruption, or else it's just an extension of the past. So it's the ayin between yesh, ayin be'emtza, leading to the yesh of a new world. A new world meaning a world, yes, a messianic world, a world of world peace. No famine, no illness, no death. That this pandemic should teach us how to eradicate disease once and for all, not allow it to even emerge, nip it in its bud. But we have our challenges, and we have our ingenuity, and we have the blessings God has given us. So empowered with Anochi Hashem Elokecha, that there's a God that gives us the strength, not just creates, but also to get out of Mitzrayim. Coupled with a God that says that my purpose will be realized in this world, but I need you as partners. We are partners in the unfolding drama, and we recognize that we are either part of the problem or part of the solution. And if you feel you're part of the solution, then you're a partner in the unfolding drama of this new world that we have the ability to build. Yes, each of us. Are you ready to take up that challenge? That's what was given to us by Matan Torah. Hashem said, you'll be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. You'll be teachers. You'll be ambassadors and agents of my mission in this world, which is to fulfill and create a divine home. And you will spread it to all people you know. Not just the Jewish people, to all people. Just as Abraham, our forefather, did. To the point that the entire world will be aware of a higher presence. It's very easy to look at the world and say we're right there. We're right at that threshold. These setbacks are setbacks in certain ways, but they're not really setbacks. Think of them. There have been losses. There have been tragedies. But there's also a tremendous opportunity. That's my take on the spiritual awakening. Not just an individual, but a collective one. So I, as an eternal optimist, have absolutely no doubt that there will be enough people that will lead the charge. Will everybody just lead, initiate? That's not usually the way the human race works. Some people are followers. They need others to lead the way. But this wake-up call, this disruption, has the ability to literally lead us into a new paradigm shift, and a permanent one, a good one, questioning even capitalism itself, money, materialism, as I mentioned. There's a lot to talk about on this matter, but will suffice for now. How to manage your life when things are chaotic. Well, with coronavirus affecting every aspect of our lives, how do we learn to manage it all? Working from home while being a constant chef, cleaning lady, disciplinarian, game buddy, child psychologist, etc., etc. And on top of all this, the schools now need us to become teacher's assistant, principal, Google Classroom, and Zoom coordinator. The list is endless. I would love my children to be learning and on a schedule, but who has space for every kid to have their own virtual classroom? While investing money in electronics, headphones, upgraded Wi-Fi, never mind the 2-year-old running around while the older kids are trying to focus. It's all very overwhelming. Many of the schools have high expectations as well as staying on top of tuition. But we are only human and cannot juggle it all. Something has got to give. So what should that be? Well, the underlying theme that I've been discussing that I can say is every challenge we have, we're not asked to do something we don't have the strength to do. My heart goes out to you, as to many other, to the millions and hundreds of millions of parents dealing with these challenges, each in our own way, different people in different stages in life. But this is what was given to us. So, first thing is be light on yourself. Don't be so heavy. You don't have to be perfect. You try your best. It's juggling. It is a juggling act. Nothing wrong with that. I think it's important not to have guilt and not to be so hard on ourselves and saying, look, it's not working out perfectly. Sometimes you have to smile. A mensch tracht, God lacht. Person thinks, God laughs. I know it's not a laughing matter, We've been plenty of grief and loss. But there's certain elements sometimes in your home, it's like any chaos breaks out. You have to step back and see what you can do. Children are beautiful people. They're unpredictable. Some of them are more patient than others. Some are more subject to discipline than others. You have to recognize those children and just really find each one their path. It's not easy, and I'm not going to minimize it. I'm not going to say, hey, what's the matter with you? No, God forbid, the opposite. I mentioned before, our good is God's good. God sees your effort, and effort is vital here. And if it doesn't always work out that day perfectly, so it didn't work out. What's the end of the world? God has blessed you with children, blessed you with life and health, and things are not necessarily perfectly working out with this weird and bizarre, crazy world in which we are now. And hopefully schools, teachers, parents, children, everybody understands that. And we're in it together, which also makes it a little lighter. And I think it's important more than ever to have that Ivdur Hashem B'Simcha attitude, to bring lightness and joy into it, which really means, so you won't be so trapped in that particular schedule. If a child one day just doesn't have it, let them be. How do you balance it all? I don't really have an answer. You have to be creative. You have to be creative. You can bribe your children with a gift, with a toy, find incentives. I just think the most important thing is that more love and more kindness comes out of this. That will make you an excellent parent, and your children will never forget it. That though it was chaotic and though things were not exactly the way we envisioned, we were resilient, we were flexible, we were dexterous. We figured it out. It's like in any given situation. And Hashem will help that this will end soon, and we'll be able to get back to more reasonable and reliable routines. But never forget that everything is sent to us by God. And this situation has its own opportunity, because it'll teach you and your children. They'll remember how you behave in times when you don't have it all figured out. And every day brings all kinds of new challenges because you don't have the normal structures and the normal schedules. And I just give you my blessing. God's that Hashem should bless you, that you should be strong and smile when need be. Hopefully your partner, your husband, the older children can help in this regard and find ways. Things are, as they say, loosening up a bit. We still have to be quite careful. But I wouldn't just rely on that. I think this time period will ultimately show that it provided a new type of experiences, which can only make us stronger. Okay. Does the coronavirus have any connection with Moshiach? The truth is, I should have read that one prior to the last question, because it was a direct flow. Does Moshiach have to be an actual physical living person, or can Moshiach be a new worldwide attitude of goodness and kindness? For example, in the near future, when coronavirus is cured and people come out of their homes for the first time in a long time, there will probably be spontaneous dancing and unity in the world with exchanges of gifts and acts of kindness. Can that new aura in the world be Mashiach, or does it still have to be one specific human leading us? The answer to that, both. One of the most powerful things about the Jewish way of looking at Mashiach is very different than other ways. That Mashiach is not just an event that happens. It's a process. It says, the first day of creation, that the Spirit of God, the breath of God, hovered over the waters. So the Medrash says, what's Ruach? Ruach shel Mashiach. Le nivra elam ela b'shvil Mashiach, the Gemara says in Sanhedrin. Mashiach, as I described earlier, was embedded from the beginning of time as the purpose and realization of why God created the world in the first place. So it's not some side little show, God forbid. Not a superfluous thing. It's critical. So from the beginning of time, Adam and Chava, had they eaten from the tree of life and not from the tree of knowledge, would have brought the Gula. Throughout history, every good deed is a building block. You can call it a little Mashiach building block. It releases a little divine energy, which is essentially the essence of Mashiach, as the Alter Rebbe says in the beginning of Perek Lamed Zayin 37 in Tanya. What is Mashiach Tchias HaMesim? Gili Erein Sov Be'elam Hazeh Gashmi. Divine revelation and presence in this manifest in this world. That was always the purpose. So it's a process. With every good deed, bring it closer. Ultimately, all the accumulation of all these building blocks lead us to what we call Geula. However, it also comes with an event. That Geula, the moment of Geula, Hashem says, is not going to just happen. I'm going to send a messenger, just like I sent Moshe Rabbeinu. That also was a process. Golus Mitzrayim. The Eibishter could have taken the Jews out without Moshe Rabbeinu, but he wanted a human being for different reasons, to lead the way. But it was also at the end of the process, well, at some point, Moshe Rabbeinu entered the picture and led the process. The Geula is the same thing. There's a process, exactly like you said, which is an aura and a worldwide attitude, obviously. And then there's a Mashiach, someone from Beis David, who's committed to Torah and mitzvahs and influences others, will be the messenger that will lead us into this new era. But the era is being developed even before Mashiach actually comes. Definitely before Mashiach is revealed. There's a process. So both are true. And we are now in the process. As we're told by the Rebbe, we're at the end of the process. We're at the threshold, and we have to do that one final thing that will ultimately have that eruption, pandemic of goodness and kindness that will transform the world. But not miraculously, because it was the end. It's a long process till this point. What's Chassidus' take on always taking a bad thing and saying Mashiach is coming? Chassidus' take is, like I said, everything is going toward Mashiach. Things that are revealed good and things that are not revealed good. We pray and hope that it should only be revealed good, and we shouldn't need to go through. But we have gone through Chavlei Mashiach, unfortunately, the birth pangs, in the worst possible way, 80 years ago. But do we must go through that? The Rebbe has said many times, citing it Tzemach Tzedek and Eira Teira Maseh, and the Rebbe is saying it many times without citing it as well, that the Eibishter can do it without that. And we've already gone through enough of that. We don't need that. That's already been covered. So when we see something that seems bad, we pray that it should end as quickly as possible, and the revealed good should come out of it, and that too should lead to the Geula. That's the take. Did the Rebbe say that increasing in acts of goodness and kindness is what we must do to bring Mashiach? Absolutely. When he was asked by CNN, by dollars, what is your message to the world, Rabbi, about Mashiach? The Rebbe said it's already been written up in papers, and the Rebbe said, Mashiach is on his way. And when we increase in goodness and kindness, that will speed it up. Those are the Rebbe's words, goodness and kindness, which is essentially what the Rebbe would say in the Sichos, Tzedek v'Yosher, which is the essence of the Sheva Mitzvahs Bnei Noach, of all laws of civilization. I'm not going to say its exact meaning, Teva Chesed, goodness and kindness, but that's what the Rebbe said. The Rebbe also said, Lilmid Inyan Geula Mashiach, awareness. Why didn't the Rebbe say that to CNN? Maybe because it's not for everyone. Not everyone is going to learn. The Rebbe wanted an action. Different ways you can explain it. Maybe by doing goodness and kindness, it will lead you to learn about the bigger picture. But the Rebbe wanted something that as a message, an action message. So change in our work today to bring Mashiach. I greatly enjoy and look forward to your weekly Chassidus Applied Shurim. Thank you. With the world turned upside down and everyone struggling to adapt to the new reality, it is obvious that it's Mashiach's times. I was wondering if our Avodah now remains the same as before. Are we supposed to be doing everything we are doing before in our new state, virtual, or are we supposed to be focusing on something else at this time? I would greatly appreciate it if you can respond. Thank you. Psuras Tevis and Mashiach now. Well, the Rebbe made it very clear, and the Derech Yeshara, the Rebbe's words after the Chav Chesnis and Sicha, the direct path, the straight path, is we are given the tools. We were given them at Matan Torah and prior, not in the formal way. Torah and mitzvahs. These are God's instruments of creating global change and personal change. God gave us a blueprint. The Torah is a blueprint. We don't need a new blueprint, God forbid. We need to apply that blueprint and apply those instruments. And I say mitzvahs as mitzvahs from the word safsa, connections. So if you think the blueprint and the connections are there, we have the blueprint and the tool chest. What we have to do is apply it to our lives in a personal way, in a relevant way, in an exciting way to fulfill the kavanah, the intention of bringing the Geula. So we say to do something new? No, we don't need new tools. We need new methods, new ways to reach people. Yes, technology is definitely a way, much more virtual. So we have to look at this situation and be creative and find many new ways. There's also new receptivity. It's far easier to speak to people now. They're receptive, they're vulnerable. So all that demands new approaches. So it's taking what was always given to us, but it's translating it and expressing it in a language that people can hear. Oh, we're dealing with a pandemic, there's fear. You have issues at home. Here's what Torah Chassidus says about that. There's a pandemic in the streets. Here's what Torah Chassidus says about that. So is that new? It's new because it's applying to new situation. But it's the same message fundamentally without compromising the integrity of the original. That's the newest thing you can do, is take that which was timeless and always there, but articulate it. The Rebbe came and was machadish. The Torah mitzvahs and Chassidus that was given. But the language, the approach, now shlichus is necessary. That was not done before. Either was not possible or wasn't the time for it yet. Technology exists now. So obviously we have to use that. And that's just the beginning. To sit and strategize and use our minds and figure out new ways. Absolutely. So if anyone says, I'm going to just do what I did till now, but they say insanity. Doing the same thing, expecting different results. It's 26 years. We're going into 26 years from when the Rebbe, from Gimel Tammuz almost. 29 years from Chof Ches Nisan. You have to ask yourself, whatever we did not bring the Geula in the fullest sense of the word. So what is missing? You have to look for new, innovative ways. And we have many opportunities today. Unprecedented new opportunities. Okay. I'll do one more question. There's some I'm going to leave for next week. But we're getting there. Miracles replaying. Did the Rebbe once say at a Fabring on Shabbos HaGadol, based on the teaching of the Arizal, that when Jews recount and celebrate past historical miracles, that it can make the miracle replay itself in some form in the present time? So what miracle of the past can we recount and celebrate in order to have God make a current miracle and stop the coronavirus? Yes, the Rebbe quoted, actually, it's the Arizal, the Ramaz, the name of the Arizal, Hayomim Ha'elin Niskarim V'Nasim, from the Megillah in Purim. So Purim, where it actually became announced as a pandemic, this coronavirus was Shushan Purim, interestingly. So on that posuk, the Rebbe cites from the Ramaz, from the Arizal, that Hayom, what's a Niskarim V'Nasim? What's the V'Nasim? Hayom Meil and Niskarim. These days we remember what happened back then, Nasim. By remembering, we recreate, because time is a spiral, and the energy that existed then is recreated every year during that time. So exactly right. On a Purim, we can recreate the miracles that happened Purim. On Pesach, the same. On Shavuos, the same. Because it's not just remembering what happened in the past, commemorating, it's recreating. What miracles? Every miracle that you can call upon, let's call upon. Whether it's the Purim miracle back then, or Pesach miracle, or Shavuos miracle. What miracles can we call upon? There were times where they were Magefa, and the Torah says what to do, like the Torah that the Eibishter said, riots that stopped the Magefa, the epidemic in time of Kairach. And actually, Torah, as we spoke about a few months ago, is one of the ways that says in Zohar, and the Alter Rebbe said it, that Arizal says that, Alter Rebbe, that learning Parshat Torah is one of the ways. Obviously, we have to do everything medically, but the additional miracle is to do things as it was done in the past, which includes, by the way, quarantining is a halacha. It's a directive. It's not just being safe. The Torah says to do that. Learning from the pasuk of Mitzrayim that va'atem le'seitzu ish mepesach be'esei ad boker, that you should not leave the home. There's a purpose in that. So all of these are the things that help us recreate the miracle. And Hashem should create that miracle, and hopefully this all ends very, very brief, short, quickly. Rab Mendel Haradokas said that he was quarantined in Tovkuf Lamed Ches, I think it was, Lamed Aleph, I'm not sure what year it was, in Chevron, from Purim to Shavuos. Interesting, Purim to Shavuos. So during Yontif, I was speaking in one of the outdoor back minyan, and I said that Purim to Shavuos and Purim, the Gemara in Masechta Shabbos says, has a connection. Because by Matan Torah, it says, Kaf Aleim Har Kegigis. God held the mountain over them, almost like an ultimatum. So Medar Abel Araisa, they can have a taina, the Jews. We didn't do this completely with our own volition. They said Taka Nasa V'Nishma, but there was something compelled us. Comes Purim, Kimu V'Kibla Yehudim, Asher Echelu Lases. Says the Gemara, That Purim came through their own volition. It was completely from themselves. So that consummated Matan Torah. So Purim to Shavuos is interesting that maybe when we have challenged, like with this pandemic, and you have to find new innovative ways to serve Hashem. Same Torah mitzvahs, but new ways to do so, with a new inner feeling, new pnimius, a new emotional passion, that creates the Purim experience in Shavuos and Matan Torah that allows us to recognize the real shlichus that we had here, was to wake us up, to serve God with a real sincerity and genuineness that perhaps may have been lacking when we did it mechanically and based on cultural comfort zones. So Eibishter should help everyone who needs a refuah shlema should have a complete refuah shlema. We should really get out of this whole thing completely. The rifts in our society should be mended by recognizing everybody, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, justice, accountability to all equally. Keep it away from politics, keep it away from all the other smokescreens, people using it for their own agendas and their own sometimes criminal behavior. And Hashem should bless us that we should take a bizeicha, that this ayin be'emtza, this strange period, should lead us to the transition of a new paradigm shift. One, where lo yi'esu kol ha'elam, that the business of the world would be nothing but l'dases Hashem b'lvad, to know God. Like the pasuk in Yeshaya, lo yereu v'lo yashchisu b'chol har kodshi, there will be no more evil and no more destruction. Ki mala ha'aretz deis Hashem k'mayim la'yom hachasim. K'mayim la'yom hachasim. There will be knowledge, because the knowledge will fill the world, will fill the earth, as waters cover the sea. Everyone have a very post-Shavuos, simchadika, and healthy days of the Yemei Tashlumin. We're here every Sunday, 8 to 9 p.m. It's always an honor and a pleasure, and we should remain healthy, strong, and above all, be part of the solution of marching all that's happening, helping us march to the Geula Hamitis Vashlema.
This program is brought to you by My Life, Chassidus Applied. Please help us continue our programs. Make even a small contribution at chassidusapply.com/donate.